Imagine like striking a chisel against a block of solid marble.
Okay.
And instead of just chipping away the stone, the physical boundary completely dissolves.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a living, breathing entity steps right out of the rock. And today we aren't talking about metaphor or, magic.
Right.
We are looking at a framework that treats this exact scenario as like a mechanical operational reality.
Which is pretty mind-bending when you really get into it.
It totally is. So welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to explore a fascinating 2006 philosophical text by Zui Feng. It's titled Reality Emerges from the Mind chapter of Celestial Cultivation, Article 12.
Yeah, it's a heavy title.
It is, right. But the goal here is to decode his really profound argument. He's saying that a deeply purified, intensely focused consciousness doesn't just, perceive reality around you. It actually creates it.
Yeah, it fundamentally constructs the architecture of reality. And it's a text that completely collapses that safe distance we usually keep between the internal world of our thoughts and the external world of solid matter.
Yeah, the barrier just kind of vanishes.
Exactly. And Zhifeng uses these extreme, almost startling examples. I mean, statues coming to life, painted cranes physically detaching from walls.
People vibrating out of the visible spectrum.
Right. But he's not writing fantasy here, and he isn't speaking purely in allegory either.
Really? Because it sounds a lot like fantasy at first glance.
I know it does, but he is actually laying out a mechanical blueprint for how structure, ambient energy, and human consciousness all interact on basically a quantum level.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Because the text doesn't even try to ease you into this theory, right? It just drops straight into the deep end with this concept of creation through absolute devotion.
Right.
We get two immediate stories. So the first is a sculptor who decides to carve a celestial maiden out of stone.
Beautiful story. Yeah.
It really is. And the text stresses that this isn't some passive artistic endeavor. He isn't just relying on muscle memory or technique.
No, he pours his essence, his energy, spirit, heart, and mind into the stone.
Right. He is actively conversing with the image in his head. He's forging this singular, unbroken focus. And when he makes the final strike, the physical stone remains stone, but, and this is the wild part, the non-material essence of the maiden steps out.
Yeah, and forms an eternal bond with him. And that distinction is really critical to understand the author's point.
How so?
Well, the stone doesn't transmute into flesh. The internal consciousness of the sculptor reaches such a high density that it actually projects an independent, non-material essence right into the physical space.
Ah, okay.
The art is basically just acting as the conduit.
That makes sense. And right after that, Shuefeng gives us a painter.
Yes, the crane painter.
Yeah, he creates these celestial cranes on a wall in front of this massive crowd. And as soon as a crane is finished, it physically detaches from the plaster and just flies away into the sky.
Which is quite the visual.
It's incredible. But, I was trying to relate this to everyday life. Is this like when you're so deep into a creative project, say you're writing code or building a business or composing music, and there's that threshold you cross?
Oh, like a flow state.
Exactly. A flow state where the project stops being just an idea and suddenly feels like a living system acting on its own.
Right. It takes on its own momentum.
Yeah. But Sufen seems to be pushing way past psychological flow states into literal manifestation. Are we talking literal magic here?
Yeah.
I mean, how are we supposed to read the physics of a painted crane flying off a wall without just dismissing it as folklore?
What's fascinating here is how Zhifeng contextualizes that exact story. You might assume he's holding up the painter as the ultimate master of this craft.
Right, because making a painting fly is pretty impressive.
You'd think so. But he actually dismisses making a painting fly off a wall as a trivial skill.
Wait, really? Trivial?
Yeah, he calls it the most cumbersome method, which initially sounds absurd given that it completely defies our known laws of physics.
Seriously, I'd love to have that trivial skill.
Right. But in his framework, it is trivial because it still relies entirely on manipulating external material structure.
Oh, I see. Because the painter is still bound by the paint and the wall.
Exactly. The true supreme art he's pointing toward isn't about altering matter at all. It's about mental cultivation, the complete cultivation of the mind.
So the stories are just meant to show that total devotion bridges the gap between material structure and non-material energy.
Spot on. The sculptor achieved his result not through mechanical skill with the chisel, but because his internal reality, his mental focus became so dense, it overrode his immediate physical reality.
So the physical object is just an anchor point.
Yes.
The real heavy lifting, the actual physics of the event, is happening entirely in the consciousness driving the chisel.
Exactly. The material world is just the screen that the projector is hitting.
The screen the projector is hitting. I like that.
Thanks. And if we accept the premise that intense focus can project a reality outward, it naturally leads to the question of what happens when that exact same mechanism is turned entirely inward,
Oh, wow.
right? What happens when you stop trying to animate a statue and instead apply that concentrated essence to your own structural reality?
Which brings us to the text's, honestly, strange but brilliant collision of cultural references.
Yeah, this part is really unique.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Xu Feng takes the classic Chinese folktale of Liang Shambo and Zhu Yingtai, the butterfly lover.
Right, very famous story.
And he completely rewrites the ending. Traditionally, this is a tragedy, right? The lovers die and transform into beautiful insects.
Right.
But here, there's this violent thunderstorm. A bolt of lightning cracks open the tomb, they perform a final rite, and literally ascend into the celestial realm together.
This is very dramatic.
Super dramatic. And then, in the very next breath, the text pivots from ancient Chinese folklore to quoting the ninth insight from the Celestine prophecy.
Which is a Western spiritual novel from the 1990s.
Right. We have characters in that 90s novel vibrating at such a high frequency that they distort and become completely invisible to the people around them. They're literally shouting, "They can't see us!"
It's quite a jarring transition, honestly.
Yeah, how are these two vastly different sources, separated by centuries and geography, making the exact same point?
Well, structurally, it serves a very precise purpose. Both narratives serve as case studies in evolution through vibration.
Okay, vibration.
Yeah. Whether it's a lightning strike triggering a sudden ascension or a group of people vibrating out of the visible light spectrum, Shuofeng is illustrating a hard operational rule here.
And what's that rule?
That this elevated celestial state, this general rapture, cannot be accessed until an individual completely abolishes fear.
But why fear? I mean, we talk about fear constantly in psychology and biology as an evolutionary survival mechanism. It literally keeps us alive.
Sure, from a biological standpoint.
So how does Whiffing logically link a psychological state like fear to a literal shift in physical or energetic vibration?
Because in this framework, fear isn't simply a fleeting emotion. It's an energetic static.
Static.
Yeah, it's a dense, heavy frequency that inherently contracts consciousness.
Yeah.
If you think about the physical and neurological reaction to fear, your vision narrows, your muscles tense, your breathing becomes shallow, you enter a highly defensive posture.
Right, fight or flight.
Exactly. Your focus becomes entirely grounded in protecting your immediate material structure. You are anchoring yourself to the densest possible version of reality.
Oh, I see. So you can't vibrate higher if you're weighed down by all that density.
Precisely. And Wu-Sang argues that the mechanical opposite of this contraction is the perception of beauty.
The perception of beauty. So beauty isn't just an aesthetic preference in this text. It's an operational mechanism.
Correct. The more beauty we perceive, the more our consciousness expands rather than contracts.
And that expansion actively accelerates our vibrational frequency.
Yes. And this leads to his most profound claim about the nature of heaven or, the celestial realm.
Right, because usually we think of heaven as a place you go after you die.
But according to the text, it's not a geographical destination. Heaven is an overlapping frequency.
An overlapping frequency.
Yeah, as your perception increases and your vibration accelerates by shedding the density of fear, you realize this higher reality is already before us.
We just lack the sensory calibration to see it.
Exactly.
It's like, think of a radio station broadcasting a complex symphony directly through the room you're sitting in.
Oh, I like that analogy.
The waves are physically passing through this space right now.
Right.
But if your internal receiver is tuned to the frequency of fear or anxiety, it only picks up static.
Right.
You don't have to travel to a new room to hear the symphony. You just have to tune the dial to the right frequency.
Precisely. The text states that people who ascend are simply individuals who single-mindedly seek the mysteries of life, and that naturally raises their frequency until they step into that broadcasting range.
So they don't go anywhere new. They just become capable of experiencing the architecture that was already present in the room.
Exactly.
Okay, so if the theory holds that high vibrations and pure focus open up this overlapping reality, we really need to look at the mechanics.
Yes, how it actually works.
Right, how does this actually work at a structural level? Shuofeng outlines a sort of formula, right? A triad that dictates how all physical forms exist.
He does. It's structure, energy, and consciousness.
So structure is essentially the blueprint or the hardware,
Right. And energy is the raw power or the fuel.
but consciousness is the crucial variable.
It is the active operator. And to explain how consciousness dictates the interaction between structure and energy, Shufeng relies on the analogy of a solar stove.
This is where the philosophy really solidifies into physics for me.
Yeah, it's a great metaphor.
So think about a single tiny mirror. If you point it at the sun, it creates a glare. It reflects light, but it's essentially harmless, right? It has no real power to alter its environment.
Just a little spot of light.
Right. But if you take 10,000 of those small mirrors and angle them so all the reflections converge on one microscopic focal point, the thermal energy becomes massive.
It can instantly vaporize water or ignite solid wood.
Exactly. And he argues that human consciousness is the exact same mechanism.
The mirrors don't generate the heat themselves. They simply direct the ambient energy that's already there with absolute localized precision.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? If I look at my own mind on any given Tuesday, I am operating like a pile of scattered mirrors.
I think we all are, honestly.
Seriously. One mirror is aimed at a looming work deadline. 50 are fragmented by just doom scrolling through a chaotic news feed.
Oh, for sure.
A dozen are stuck replaying a weird conversation I had 3 days ago. The energy is dispersed in 1,000 different directions.
And because the reflection is scattered, the heat dissipates entirely.
Right. It doesn't possess the focus density required to alter reality. So the solar stove is what happens when someone aligns every single one of those mental mirrors onto a single pure goal.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this dispersion of energy is exactly why the text asserts that illness arises from the mind and reality is shaped by the heart.
Wow.
When our mirrors are scattered, we're at the mercy of our environment. But Schwiffing explains that visualized thinking, the deliberate, focused images we hold in our minds, is the literal, physical activity of the soul.
Which really reframes the whole concept of a pure soul entirely.
It does.
In this context, it has nothing to do with conventional morality or being a culturally good person. It's an operational state.
It's basically an issue of optical alignment.
Optical alignment.
Yeah, a purified soul is simply a mind that has cleaned its mirrors of dirt, meaning fear, distraction, and anxiety, and aligned them toward a singular focal point.
And when consciousness achieves that absolute, frictionless alignment, it gains the immense power to channel ambient energy and physically shape its environment.
Exactly. The Celestial Maiden steps out of the stone, not because of a magical incantation, but because the sculptor's internal mirrors were perfectly, relentlessly aligned on her image,
generating enough energetic heat to cross the threshold from non-material thought to material presence.
You got it.
Which forces us to confront the most glaring implication of this entire framework.
And what's that?
Well, if this perfectly concentrated mental energy has the power to reveal an entirely separate celestial reality that is overlapping with ours right now, why is the vast majority of humanity completely blind to it?
Yes.
I mean, if it's there, why can't we see it?
Feng explains this blind spot through a concept he calls Taiji thinking.
Taiji thinking.
Yeah.
So the idea that where there is matter, there must be non-matter.
Exactly. It's the application of fundamental duality to the architecture of the universe itself. It's a binary law. Just as every electron has a positron, where there are visible beings, there must logically be invisible ones to balance the universal equation.
And to illustrate how we bridge that gap, he uses the analogy of a dream.
Yes, the dream state analogy is perfect here.
Right, because when you're awake, walking around your house, the events of a dream seem absurd. They're clearly unreal figments of imagination.
Obviously.
But when you're fully immersed in the dream state, the architecture of that world feels completely solid. The physics of the dream are the reality.
Exactly. He argues you can only experience the vivid reality of a dream by actually entering the dream state. And similarly, you can only see the non-material world by entering it through a purified soul.
But let me present a real intellectual hurdle here.
Okay, let's hear it.
If this non-material realm is entirely invisible to our standard instruments, and the only way to measure or experience it is to radically alter my own brain state, cleaning my mental mirrors, shifting my frequency scientifically, how is that any different from a chemically induced hallucination?
That's a very fair point.
Right. Because if the observer have to essentially reprogram their own cognitive software to see it, Isn't there a danger that we're just self-inducing a psychosis and calling it enlightenment? Is the author saying we have to detach from reality to see it?
That is the precise epistemological friction point of this entire philosophy. How do we distinguish between an expanded reality and a broken mind? But Shueking anticipates this critique. He doesn't advocate for detachment from reality or some chaotic, psychotic break. What he's demanding is a paradigm shift in how we define measurement itself.
So it's not about escaping reality, but expanding the criteria for what reality is allowed to be.
Exactly. He argues that as consciousness rises and thinking sharpens, realizing this non-material world doesn't manifest as a jarring, hallucinatory break. It isn't a sudden rupture in your sanity.
Okay, so what does it feel like?
He describes the transition as becoming seamless and inevitable, as natural as the turning of the seasons.
Wow, as natural as the turning of the seasons.
Yeah, it's an organic ripening of perception.
So it's less like taking a hallucinogen and more like slowly developing night vision.
Oh, that's good.
The dark room doesn't change, right? Your eyes just adapt to process the ambient light that was already there.
That's a perfect way to frame it. And this raises an important question for everyone to consider. How limited our standard five senses might actually be when measuring reality.
Oh, for sure. They're incredibly limited.
Right. We know a dog hears acoustic frequencies we're entirely deaf to. We build scientific instruments to measure ultraviolet light, infrared radiation, magnetic fields that our naked eyes just cannot perceive.
We universally accept that reality is vastly larger than our biological hardware can detect.
Exactly. We just outsource the perception to machines instead of our own minds.
That is such a fascinating point.
Shuifeng is simply pushing that logic to its ultimate conclusion. He's arguing that human consciousness itself, when purified of fear and focused with the precision of a solar stove, is the most sophisticated sensory instrument in the universe.
So when you align those mirrors, you aren't generating a hallucination.
No, you're finally calibrating the instrument to perceive the non-material half of reality that has been balancing the equation all along.
It completely dismantles the idea that perception is just this passive act. You aren't just a camera recording the world, you are the projector. Well, if we trace the arc of what we've explored today, it really is a wild journey. It starts with the sculptor, demonstrating that absolute singular devotion can actually bridge the density gap between a mental image and a physical presence.
Right.
And from there, we looked at how the static of fear anchors our frequency and how seeking beauty accelerates our vibration until we tune into a reality that is already broadcasting all around us.
The hidden realms.
Exactly. We unpack the mechanics of the solar stove, the realization that a scattered mind diffuses energy, while a perfectly aligned consciousness generates enough heat to literally reshape its environment.
And finally, Taiji thinking.
Right, Taiji thinking. The logical necessity of an invisible world that balances the visible one, just waiting for us to calibrate our internal instruments to perceive it.
The entire text is really a masterclass in shifting the locus of control.
How do you mean?
Well, we spend our lives trying to manipulate the external material world like the painter with the flying cranes, hoping it will eventually make us feel better inside.
Right, trying to fix the outside to heal the inside.
Exactly. But Swepping outlines the exact opposite physics. Change the internal density, align the mirrors, and the outside world literally reshapes itself around you.
And I think the ultimate takeaway for you listening is the terrifying but liberating supreme power of your own focused mind.
It really is.
Shuifeng concludes this 2006 text with a mic drop line that distills everything we've talked about into a single challenge. He writes, "I have already pierced the veil. The rest is up to you."
Wow. And if we take that challenge seriously, let's return to that boundary line between your internal thoughts and the external world we discussed at the very beginning.
Right.
If the physical reality you walk through every day is truly just a structural reflection of your internal mirrors bouncing light, what unseen reality, what overlapping symphony is currently being blocked from your view by the static of your own subconscious fears?
That's a heavy question.
It is. And what would happen to the immediate physical environment around you if you managed to wipe the fear from just one of those mirrors today?